Hi everyone, Chicken here. In the last lesson, we covered the basics on rendering by going through two techniques that I use. In this lesson, we will start our rendering process with the eyes. For the next few lessons about rendering, I'm going to use a mix of the two techniques that we covered in the last lesson. We have started with the line art, but I'm gonna combine everything and render it on one layer. Do take note that this process is my style and just the way that I paint and stylize things. It can and will be different for other artists, so I hope you can just pick up some useful tricks when I break down my painting process. But just keep in mind that this is not the only way to paint things. And as always, if you need me to clarify anything, or if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to put them in the comments and I'll be happy to help. So I have here the painting plan that we painted last chapter. I encourage you to use your own painting plan that you worked on with me, but if you don't feel happy with rendering that, I've provided the PSD file of this one, so you can download it and render this painting with me. Let's zoom into the eyes first, since it is what we are going to be rendering today. The eyes consist of the eyelids, the sclera, which is the white part of your eye, and the iris. We will work from outside to in, so let's get started on the eyelids first. The eyelids are convex because it overlaps the eyeball, which is a sphere, so we are going to have shadows at the end. And the middle part will be highlighted. Next, with an even darker shadow color, I'm gonna go over the eyelid crease. And then draw the line art of the eyelid crease over. Similar to the second rendering technique I showed last lesson, we shade first, then paint the line art over our shading. Next, I'm gonna outline the shape of her eyes with a pinkish red. This not only serves as sort of a makeup, but I find that it cushions the transition between skin to the black of the eyeliner a lot better. Now that we're done with the upper eyelid, we can move on to the lower. We will go on with a shadow color and extend it down. Next, I'll pick her normal skin color and just add a small highlighted part in around the middle. Then I'll draw a line tracing the lower eyelid as the lower waterline. Now I'll just clean up her right eye a little bit, since right now it's pretty rough. And now we can move on to the eyeline part of the eyelids. I'm gonna choose a pretty dark and saturated red and start tracing over my very rough lines, cleaning it up so it looks neater. When needed, I'll just pick the skin color to kind of erase the eyeline a little bit. And I'll do the same for the other eye. Next, I'm gonna split the inner part of the top eyelid into two. One part is gonna follow the direction of the overall eye, and one part is gonna slant downwards. When I'm rendering eyes, I'm always zoomed in so much, so it can be really useful to turn on the reference tab in the settings so that we have a view of the overall picture. And along the way, I'm just gonna use the liquify tool to adjust things. Because I thought the inner part looked a bit dark, I kinda erased it away and redrew it. But I used the same technique as before, just went on with the shadows a bit lighter. Now I'm just gonna liquify it a little bit more. It's always good to adjust proportions as early as possible before we've detailed in anything. Now we can move on to detail the eyeline. The eyeline can be divided into two parts. The top layer is the eyeliner part, and the lower layer is the more inner part and is where our eyelashes will come from. Starting with the top part, I'm gonna go over with a dull and slightly lighter red. And then with a very light touch, I'm gonna introduce the hair color in also. So in this case, I've painted on a little bit of purple. Next, at the ends of the eyelids, I'm gonna paint on a little bit of a rose red, just very lightly. When we are done with the shading, we can get a dark color similar to the inner eyelid and just draw an outline over it. And then we can start painting on the eyelashes. I paint them from out to in with a few strokes, following the general direction of the eyes because they are curving outwards. And I'll do the same for the lower eyelashes too. Now, let's move on to the sclera, or the white part of the eye. For its base color, I like to pick sort of a cream. As a gauge, I usually pick a slightly lighter and less saturated color of light skin. I will avoid using white because it will look unnatural. And again, like the transition between the skin of the eyelids, I'm gonna draw a red border just to act as sort of a transition between the black and the white. Now let's move on to shading our sclera. Because our upper eye line and eyelashes will cast a shadow on the sclera, we can shade in a shadow color here. Its shape is gonna kind of follow the eye line. I'll also shade the bottom just a little bit. And now I'll blend it in a little with a smudge brush. And now we're done with the sclera. We can now move on to the iris, and again, I'm gonna use a red and just outline it to serve as a transition. Then on top of that, I'm gonna outline with the line art. Now we'll paint in a shadow color to the top half of the iris. The shape will be kind of concave. I feel that it's not dark enough, so I'm gonna darken it just a little bit. And with that same dark color, I'll draw on the pupil around the middle of the eye. And I like to draw it sort of in an oval shape. Then I'll get a dull desaturated color. I usually use a blue and paint it into one corner of the eye. I find that doing this makes our eyes look more glassy and pretty, like it's a little bit translucent. Now I'm gonna define the pupils a bit by outlining them. And I'll use that same desaturated color to color in the middle of the pupil. And finally, for the highlight, we'll use a lighter and just a little less saturated color. I'll color it in sort of zigzag strokes that go towards the pupil. Then I'll choose an even lighter color and go in again with the same zigzag motions. Now I'm gonna draw sort of pointy shadows that are the cast shadow of the eyelashes on the eye. I take a pretty dark color, maybe the color of the outline, and I paint it onto the iris, mirroring the direction of the eyelashes above. Using a white color at really low opacity, around 35%, I'm gonna paint in one corner of the eye, overlapping the outlines and everything, just to give it even more of that glassy look. And finally, we can finish off with the highlights. Depending on the environment, I may not use a flat white. Maybe a light grey or a cream will be good. Again, I avoid extreme colors because it can look unnatural. So the major highlight will be where the largest light source is coming from, but we can have multiple. I like to paint them in a sort of irregular shapes because in real life, the reflection won't be perfectly round. Now I kind of like to cut into the eye lines with a skin color, sort of following the direction of the eyelashes. And this is really just a stylistic choice. And to finish off, I like to outline the highlight using the dark outline color. I'm just gonna do very slight tweaking and cleaning up, but we are pretty much done. For the mission, render the eyes of your character. Today, we went through the process of rendering our eyes. I really hope you enjoyed it and learned something new. In the next lesson, we will be moving on to the skin. I'll take you through how I render skin and what kind of colors I choose to make our skin look more rich. I'll also be showing you how I make use of photo bashing if I have trouble rendering anything.